Good morning and namaste to all of you. Let's do the prayers first. Om Parthaye Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayan Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Puran Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Ritvarshini Bhagavati Mashtadashadhyayani Amutvam Anusandhame Bhagavata Gite Bhavatveshine नमो अस्तु ते व्यास विशाल बुद्धे फूल अरविंद आयत पत्र नेत्र येन तव्या भारत तैल पूर्णः प्रज्वलितो ज्ञान मया प्रदीपः प्रपन्न पारि जाताये तोत्र वेत्र एक पानये ज्ञान मुद्राये कृष्णाये गीता अमृत दुहे नमः सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोगदा गोपाल नंदना पार्थो वत्सा सुधीर भोगता दुग्धम गीता अमृतम महत वसुदेव सुतम देवम कंस चानूरमर्दनम देवकी परमानंदम कृष्णम वंदे जगत्गुरुम भीष्म द्रोण तटा जयद्रथ जला गंधार नीलोत्पला शल्य ग्राहवते कृपेन वहने कर्णेन वेलाकुला अश्वत्थाम विकर्ण घोर मकरा दुर्योधन अवर्तने सोतीर्णा खलु पांडवै रन्नदी वर्तका केशवा पाराशरे वत्सरोजमलम गीता अर्थगंधोटकम नानाख्यानक केसरम हरि कथा संबोधन अबोधितम लोके सज्जन षटपदे रह पे पिये मानम मुदा भूयाद भारत पंकजम कलिमल प्रध्वंसी न श्रेयसे मूकम करोति वाचालम पंगुम लंघ्यते गिरिम यत् कृपातमं वंदे परमानंद माधवम यम ब्रह्म वरुण इंद्र रुद्र मर्तः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्ये सवे वेदै सांगपद क्रमो उपनिषदै गायन्ति यम सामगा ध्यान अवस्थे तद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यम योगिनो यस्यन्तं न विदुषुर असुरगणा देवाय तस्मै नमः. We are towards the end of the second chapter, Sankhya Yoga. And we ended our last week's class with verse number 65, where Lord Krishna is telling us what will happen when peace is attained. He says, Prasade sarva dukha naam hane asya upajayate prasanna chetsa hi ashu buddhi paryavtishtate. He says, in that peace, all sorrows are destroyed. The intellect of the tranquil-minded soon becomes steady. And we all are aiming for that, knowingly or unknowingly. But he has given us a beautiful technique how to reach there, how to reach this kind of a tranquility, peace of mind, where all the sorrows are destroyed. Body could be physically in pain, but mind doesn't have to feel the sorrow. Okay, when the intellect is tranquil. So we have to go back. Always go back and see what did he tell us, how to reach here. Because Bhagavad Gita is a textbook, not about the result only, but the process also. How to attain it. But the doing we must do. Lord Krishna is not going to do it for us. Or our Guru is not going to do it for us. Sadhana we have to do. But he is telling us step by step how to do the sadhana, why to do the sadhana. Okay? So, we are looking for a grace. We think that we should have a grace from the divine energy. And that divine grace is everywhere. But how to tap into it? That's what he's teaching us. And then let's start with the next verse now. Verse number 66. Na astihi buddhi ayuktasya na cha ayuktasya bhavana Na cha abhavyata shantihi ashantasya kuta sukhat. Na means not, asti is buddhi, the knowledge, intellect, ayuktasya of the unsteady or not united, ayukta. Na means not, cha means and, ayuktasya of the unsteady, bhavna, contemplation or meditation. Na is not, cha means and, abhavyata of the unmeditated. Shanti, peace. Ashantasya of the peaceless. Kutaha, where? Sukham, happiness. He says there's no knowledge. And this knowledge, he's talking about knowledge of the self to the unsteady. Okay, so that's why this steadiness of the mind is so important. There is no knowledge of the self to the unsteady, and to the unsteady, no meditation, no contemplation, and to the unmeditated, no peace. And to the peaceless, how can there be happiness? So he is telling us, what will you get if you follow this path? And when you don't follow this path, what will happen? So this is a very clear explanation why the quietude of the mind is so often, so insistently emphasized in the scriptures. Okay, this is the reason. You can see that. So it's not just only a philosophy. This is something we need to practice. So this particular verse strengthens the conclusion of the previous verse by stating the reverse. Okay, reverse. If you do this, you get this. If you don't do this, that's where you go. This technique has been used by Lord Krishna throughout Bhagavad Gita, so that we pay attention. We make sure that we do what he's telling us to do. So that's why they say no God, no peace. And no God, K-N-O-W, no God, have peace. Okay. Indriya nam hi charatam yat manaha anuvidhyate tad asye harati pragyam vayu navam iv ambhasi. Indriya nam, senses. He means for charatam, roaming, wandering. Yat means which, mana, mind. Anuvidhyate, follows. Tad means that, asya means his, harati, carries away. Pragyam, discrimination, that higher level of intellect. Vayu, the wind. Navam, boat. Iv means like. Ambhasi, in the water. For the mind which follows in the wake of the wandering senses carries away his discrimination as the wind carries away a boat on the waters. See, that's why he told us, control the senses. Controlled senses should rein the mind, and that kind of a mind should control the intellect. So over here it says wandering senses, they carry away. In our scriptures, there is a beautiful verse. In that verse, the example is given by that great rishi about the animals. How the animals, like how the deer, he says the deer but is attached to sweet sound. And what happens? He gets caught by the hunter. Bees are attracted to fragrance and they get caught. Fish are trapped by the desire of eating. That's why they bite and they get caught. When they swallow the bait, this is the end of their life. Insects are drawn to light and they burn when they come towards the light. The weakness of the elephant is touch, and they get caught also in the nest. This great saint says all these creatures get drawn toward their death by one of these senses. What will be the fate of a human being who enjoys the objects with the help of all these senses? All the senses, eyes also, ears also, taste also, touch also, smell also. He says, Kurang matang patanga bringaha meena hataha panchi bhirev panchaha. Ekaha parmadi sakatham na hanyate yasevate panch bhirev panchaha. Okay, so that's how strong these senses are. And that's why this pratyahar is about restraining the senses. All the times we got to be careful. Are my senses just taking the better part of me out? And they cause misery for me? These are the horses, very strong horses, as a sense is given to us. Be careful. Okay, that's what Lord Krishna is saying. At this point, I would like to tell you a story about a bee. We are talking about the bee in that particular verse. Very beautiful story. There was a bee sitting on a lotus flower, drinking its nectar. As the sun started to set, the petals, they started to close. And bees looked at it. He knew that they are shutting, but bee was so attached to enjoying the object of the senses, refused to fly off. She said, maybe a little bit more. Maybe it will not close that fast. There is still time for the flower to close. Let me suck some more nectar while I can. It became dark. The lotus flower got closed. Bee was trapped inside. It thought, what is the worry? I'm inside this beautiful flower. There is more nectar in there. I'm going to keep sucking the nectar. I will remain in this flower until the morning when the lotus flower opens again. Then I'll fly away. The bee is strong enough to cut the wood. Bee could have cut the flower also to get out, but still attached to the nectar in that flower. That's how we are attached to the objects. In the meanwhile, what happened? An elephant came, broke the lotus from the stem, and swallowed the flower as well as the bee. Attachment. This is what Lord Krishna is pointing it out to us. Okay. Now, after explaining how to get the peace, and if we don't do what we are supposed to, we won't get the peace. He says, Tasmat yasya mahabhaho nigrihitani sarvasha indriyane indriya arthabhya tasya pragya pratishtita. Tasmat, therefore. Okay, after giving the very strong reasons to us, he says, therefore, Yasya means whose, Mahabaho, O mighty armed, that is for Arjuna, Nigrihitane, restrained, Sarvasha, completely, Indriyani, the senses, Indriya Arthebhya, from the sense objects. Tasya, his pragya, knowledge, pratishtita, steady. Therefore, O mighty armed, his knowledge is steady, whose senses are completely restrained. From where? From the sense objects. It's as simple as that. So enlightened person, because he told us that the sthit pragya is a person who is enlightened. So enlightened person, how does an enlightened person controls the senses? Through this kind of a knowledge. With this knowledge, intellect is purified. With a purified intellect, that person controls the mind, and the mind controls the senses. Otherwise, senses are too powerful. So knowledge is important. And when we study something like this is a food for our intellect. But we don't want to just keep the food over there and not assimilate it. Assimilation of the food will show whether we have a control over our senses or not. Whether our mind is in our control or not. Because in the materially conditioned state, he told us what happens. We can get tossed into this world. But at the same time, living in this world, we can have this kind of a peace also. So life in self-control alone is life worth living. Control, restraint, not a suppression, but a restraint. Okay? Because suppression is unintelligently done. Restraint is intelligently done. Knowing why I should stay away from another gulab jamun or another 30 minutes of watching TV or going somewhere where there's no need for me to go. Because constantly we are choosing, should I do this or should I do this? Intellect. Because ordinary individual in his egocentric existence becomes victimized by the sense organs. But a person who has conquered the ego, has transcended his identifications with the matter, comes to live in freedom. Perfect control. And these are the personalities which are called Jivan Mukta. They have the senses. They are living in this world, but with a full control, perfect control over the sense organs. And in order to make it more clear, Lord Krishna says, Ya nisha sarva bhutanam, tasyam jagrati sanyami, yasyam jagrati bhutani, sa nisha pashyata mune. Deep philosophy in this verse also. We got to understand what does it really mean by nisha and jagrati. Ya means which? Nisha, night. Sarva bhutanam, of all beings. Tasyam, in that. Jagrati, wakes. Sanyami, the self-controlled. Yasyam, in which. Jagrati, wakeful. Bhutani, all beings. Sa means that. Nisha, night. Pashyata, of the seeing. Mune, of the Mune. That which is night to all beings. In that the self-controlled man wakes. Where all beings are awake, that is the night for the sage who sees. So over here, Lord Krishna has used day and night figuratively. People often get confused about the meaning of this verse actually. Some people think that no, a Muni or a yogi stays awake all night and sleeping during the daytime. No, that's not what it means. Let's look at it. That which is night to all beings. That means that they don't pay much attention to it. Average person does not pay attention to the real purpose of life, which is self-realization. That means the ultimate goal, they are asleep towards it. Either they keep on postponing, they say, we'll work on it when we are old. We'll do it later. Let us enjoy this life first. So that's what he means by this, that which is night to all beings. They are asleep towards the goal of life. But a yogi, he is awake towards that. Doesn't want to waste time. We don't know how much time do we have in this particular embodiment. Or even in this embodiment, how do we know that what is going to happen tomorrow? To the powers which God has given it to us, power to see, power to hear, power to help, power to study. So yogi, yoga abhyasi is very attentive to that. He says, no, today, right now, I want to start walking on this path diligently. I don't want to wait until the old age, or when my kids are married, or my kids have the kids, or when I'm retired. So there's excuses. So that which is night to all beings, in that the self-controlled man is fully awake. And the second part is where all beings are awake. Majority of the people are awake towards it, enjoying the nectar, just like that bee wanted to enjoy the nectar. This nectar through the senses. People say, no, I got to go there, I got to have this, I got to meet this. People, even without thinking about it, start saying that we live only once. All their life, they just waste roaming outside purposelessly. Okay, so that which is night to all beings, in that the self-controlled man is awake. Where the all beings are awake, that is the night for the sage, because that Muni, that yogi, that abhyasi does not pay much attention. It's not necessary. So these are very clear two views he has given us in this verse. So that's why I said, don't study this literally. Just look at the deep philosophical meaning in this verse. So we got to control our senses. With that controlled senses, we got to live this life. So those who are in mundane consciousness look to mundane enjoyment. They don't know the real purpose of life. They are constantly looking for the opportunity for worldly pleasures at the success. On the other hand, when you start seeing this divine, this divinity in your life, or the presence of divinity in you, that's where the wisdom is coming from. So this is what he's talking about. Let's look at, there's only a couple of more verses left, or 3 more verses left. Let's try to finish this today. Apuryamanam achal pratishtham samudram apa pravishanti yadvat tadvad kamaha yam pravishanti sarve sa shantim apnoti na kam kami. This is another very popular verse. My own Gurudev Ji often in his sermons recited either the full verse or at least part of it. Apuryamanam achal pratishtham. Apuryamanam, filled from all sides. Achal pratishtham, undisturbed. When you are based on the stillness, achal pratishtham. Samudram, ocean. Apaha, water. Pravishanti, enter. Yadvad, as. Tadvad, likewise. Kamaha, desires. Yam means whom. Pravishanti, enter. Sarve, all. Sa, he. Shantim, peace. Apnoti, attains. Na kam kami. Na means not. Kam kami means desirer of desires. Kam kami. He attains peace, into whom all desires enter as waters enter the ocean. So he's giving us an analogy over here. Water keeps on going from the rivers, all the rivers flow into the ocean. The rainwater goes into the ocean. But he says, he attains peace, into whom all desires enter as waters enter the ocean, which filled from all sides remains unmoved. But not the desire of the desirers. That means a yogi is living in this world, objects are there, but even after seeing the objects outside, after hearing it, there is no disturbance in the mind. Just like an ocean. Just like an ocean. Okay, so have a intellect of yours like an ocean, so deep that outside does not have any effect. You go somewhere, you see something, that doesn't mean that you have to have it. Somebody talks about they have gone somewhere, that doesn't mean that you got to purchase the ticket in next hour to go there. No effect in your mind. Because ordinarily what happens, somebody says something and there is a halchal in our own mind. How come I have not gone there? How come I have not seen it? So yogi's mind is like an ocean. No effect, no matter what is happening outside. So such an individual alone can truly discover peace, he says, and happiness in himself. Otherwise, if the desires keep on gurgling inside our mind, there's no peace, there's no tranquility. Today this, tomorrow that. And this idea is totally in opposition to the modern belief in the material world. Average person has 1,000,000 times more desires today than our forefathers ever entertained. But this philosophy, this truth is the same now, whether it was 5,000 years ago or now, or even after 5,000 years ago. Joy or happiness at any given time is a quotient when the number of desires fulfilled is divided by the total number of desires entertained. Remember that formula, which we often talk about. Okay. So the desirer of desires can never come to perfect peace. So therefore he says, Vihai kaman yasarvan puman charti nisipriya nirmama nirahankara sa shantim adigachati. Vihai, giving up, abandoning. Kaman, desires. Ya means that, sarvan, all. Puman, person. Charati, moves about. Nisipriha, free from longing. Nirmama, devoid of mindness, without a sense of proprietorship. Nirmama. Nirahankara, without egoism. Sa means he, shantim, to peace, adigachati, attains. So in this verse, Lord Krishna has listed the things that disturb our peace. Number one is material desires. Second one is greed. Third one is ego. The fourth one is proprietorship. Okay. So kaman, nisipriha, nirmama, nirahankara, we got to cultivate these qualities. The person attains peace who, abandoning all desires, moves about without longing. Okay, nisipriha. Without the sense of I-ness and mine-ness. So the first line in this verse explains the mental condition of the person who comes to discover real peace in himself. Vihai kaman yasarvan puman charti nisipriha. And the second line, he is describing the condition of such an individual's intellect. That intellect which asserts that it is without any sense of I-ness and mine-ness. Idam namam. Nothing is ours. We are only custodian of it. So if the first line of this verse is describing a negation of the effects of ignorance, okay, Vihai kaman and nisipriha. The second line, he's asserting the absence of the very cause from which desires and the agitations arise. So they're all connected. These four words very closely connected. So when there's a nirmam and a nirahankara, only then there can be a nisipriha and vihai kaman. So by cultivating nirmam and nirahankara, we have to reach nisipriha and vihai kaman. Otherwise, if we constantly are under the clause of this aham and the mam, then we cannot let go of the greed and the desires. So the feeling of proprietorship or the ownership is based upon the ignorance. Ignorance. And what is this ignorance? Thinking that it's mine. I have achieved it. I have worked hard for it. That's ignorance. The whole world belongs to God and God only. We came here empty-handed and we will go back empty-handed. None of these objects gonna go with us, no matter how much we like to. So this is the ignorance in us. But when we, with the help of all this knowledge, when we purify our heart, that means mind and intellect over here, we feel the grace of God, as he mentioned in verse number 64. And then by his grace, he grants divine knowledge. divine bliss, divine love to all of us. Because these are all divine energies that they are given by God to the person who is really walking on this path earnestly. Okay, so nirmam nirahankara. Last verse of this chapter. Eshaha brahmi sthiti parth na enam prapye vimuhyati sthitva asyam ant kale api brahm nirvanam richati. Esha, this brahmi. Brahmi means of Brahma. Sthiti means state. So another way you can understand this is a state of God realization. Parth, na means not, enam means this, prapye, having attained. Vimuhyati is deluded. Sthitva, being established. Asyam is this, antakale, in the end of life. Api, even. Brahm nirvanam, oneness with Brahm. Richati, attains. This is the Brahmic state, or the God realization. O son of Prit. Attaining this, none is deluded. So delusion is all gone. Being established therein, even at the end of life, one attains to oneness with the Brahma. So end of this life means, because sometimes we wonder, we started walking on this path late. Maybe there's not enough time. But he says, stay on the path. Stay on this path. Okay? Towards the end of this life also, you can attain this. Do not lose hope. Because we have to end the ego. The mum and aham and the mum, I-ness and the mindness, we got to keep on working on that. We got to just know this truth. When we know this truth, we know the self and we know that Brahma, that state is called Brahmic state. This is a technical term over here. Okay, so if the doubt comes into our mind that I may fall back, no, once you are there, once you have attained this, there's no slipping back. That is the promise he is making over here. He says, na enam prapya vimuhyati. Once you know this, then that is it. Okay, so having realized the self once, no more that individual falls back into this delusion. Maybe, maybe not. If there is still some doubts, that means we have not experienced it yet. But once we experience it, that is it. So it can happen even at the last minute of this embodiment. So this is what he's promising it to us. So this is the last verse of this great chapter. In this chapter, he touched upon Karam Yoga also, Dhyan Yoga also, Sannyas Yoga also. There's a touch upon lot of different areas where he will go into the detail chapter by chapter, starting from next chapter, because next chapter is a Karam Yoga chapter. So more or further elaboration on the Karam Yoga in the next chapter. Okay, so let's do the Shanti part and we'll have some discussion. And then at the end, I will request Manny to sing a bhajan. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishishyate. Om Shanti 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 Om.